The final debate for the NDP leadership candidates is set for this Thursday. It comes ahead of next month's convention where New Democrats will choose their new leader. There are 5 contenders for the leadership. Rob Ashton is a union leader who worked for 30 years as a dock worker. Tenille Johnston is a social worker and the first Indigenous woman to run for NDP leadership. Avi Lewis is a filmmaker and longtime activist. Heather McPherson is the current NDP MP for the riding of Edmonton-Strathcona. And Tony McQuail is a lifelong organic farmer. Power and Politics has already done interviews with Rob Ashton, Avi Lewis, and Heather McPherson. Let's turn now to Tony McQuail, who is also one of those candidates in the race, and he joins me now. Nice to see you, sir. Thanks for coming on.
Well, it's my pleasure. And I'm glad to be here.
All right.
A farmer for, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say to you, there's 5 of you in that race. Obviously, I just read off those names. Some are better known than you. They've raised more money than you. They've racked up some key endorsements. Why should party members pick you? What's your pitch to members, sir?
Well, my pitch is that as a parent and a grandparent, as a farmer for over 50 years, and as a New Democrat for over 45, there's some really critical things we need to be dealing with. And in our campaign, we're talking about 4 R's: representation, regeneration, redistribution, and redesign. And they're all critical to not only the NDP, but to all of us who live in Canada and around the world. But representation is first on our list, because unless we deal with the first past the post electoral system, we aren't going to get stable governments. We're going to get these phony majority governments that end up controlling Parliament with maybe 38 to 40% of the popular vote. Right. And for democracy to work well, you need everybody around the table in proportion to how the public supports them. So that's the first thing. But I bring a lot of experience and a lot of commitment over the years.
Yeah, speaking of commitment, you've run for the party 7 times, right? Both federally and provincially since 1980. You've seen the party evolve over time. You know, some have said the New Democrats have sort of lost their way. I mean, the fundraising numbers aren't great. Obviously, it's not actually a caucus in Parliament because there's so few MPs. The polling numbers aren't looking so good. Why is the party struggling to connect with voters, do you think, and how can you turn it around?
Well, as I say, I think one of the big aspects is the first past the post system, which has handicapped women and working men since they got the vote after the First World War. Because with first past the post, the more established parties tend to be the ones who win. And so then parties like the United Farmers or the Independent Labour, Cooperative Commonwealth, the New Democrats, and now the Greens, all tend to be badly underrepresented. And when people feel their votes don't count, they either vote strategically or worse, they give up on voting. And that's what we're seeing. Over half the people who are eligible to vote don't vote, and over half the people who do vote don't get any representation because of first past the post and the way it skews representation. So this is a serious problem for the NDP. It's also been a serious problem for the Greens and our predecessor parties. Because if people don't have hope that you can win, they don't vote for you. And so that's why I've been calling for developing a green progressive coalition or collaboration. I'm not saying merge parties, but I'm saying until we get a proportional representative electoral system, which most Canadians want, and that includes Liberals who are disenfranchised in Alberta, Conservatives who are disenfranchised in downtown Toronto. We need a system where everybody's vote counts in every election for representation, and then governments that actually represent a majority of the people in the country rather than 40% that want to go this way and 40% that want to go that way. So that's why representation is so important, and building cooperation and some form of coalition to put forward what I would call a green progressive alternative to the Liberals and Conservatives.
Okay, I mentioned you're a farmer. You know how important the American market is for farm products. I was looking at the stats today. 60% of agri-food exports go to the U.S. every year, and of course that relationship is on shaky ground right now. How do you propose we as a country, and if you were to form government, deal with Donald Trump?
Well, I think we have to look to how do we relocalize our food system so that we are really much more self-reliant and not nearly as dependent on export as a major portion. This is part of the redesign R in our 4 Rs, because we need to be looking at trade relationships that are not that are mutually beneficial, that have a cooperative advantage rather than a competitive advantage. And this doesn't happen overnight, but we have to have a clear goal, and that is to be self-reliant in our food and to have trade relationships that are long-term. I mean, the Conservatives cut the Canadian wheat board out of the system. Well, that was something that had farmers being supported in government-to-government work that made sure that farmers got a fair value for the quality of wheat that we were producing. And so we need to get back into that kind of as I say, cooperative advantage in our trade. But we really need to focus in a time of climate crisis and increasing trade instability and saying, do we really want to be that vulnerable? Or do we want to figure out how to create a secure food system that works for Canadians?
You know, historically, there's been this debate within your party about whether you should be kind of the party of conscience, pushing progressive ideas in the House of Commons, maybe pulling the Liberals to the left on some issues. And then there are others who say, well, really, we should try and win. We should try and form government. That should be a top priority. What do you think about that issue? Do you think it's best to be just the guy with the ideas, or should you try and govern?
No. JP, the guy with the ideas who governed was Tommy Douglas, and that's why we have health care. We need to govern. When I ran in 1980 as a young farmer, I ran because I wanted Ed Broadbent to be our leader and as our prime minister, and I wanted the NDP, who were talking about dealing with inflation caused by energy price escalation, by dealing with renewable energy and conservation and efficiency, whereas the Liberals and Conservatives are saying, we're going to fight inflation with high interest rates. And that just jacked up inflation for farmers, for homeowners, for small businesses. We have had the preaching of a capitalist corporate consumerist ideology that we've got to keep growing. We've got to keep growing. What we're seeing is ever increasing inequality in terms of wealth growing, and also incredible damage and growth in environmental damage. So we've got to change, and the only people who are really thinking about are, the NDP and the Green Party, right, and possibly the Bloc Québécois in terms of progressive stuff. We've got our current leadership, whether you call it the 1%, the elite, or the decision makers, have been taking us in the wrong direction from my perspective in terms of environmental health and social equality for all the 45 years that I've been involved. So yes, I don't want to be the conscience, because the other thing that happens is you get something like healthcare because of the leadership of Tommy Douglas and others, and then people who don't believe in it, you've got in Alberta, they're tearing apart the health system, and in Ontario, Doug Ford's starving it. And so, if you don't have a real stake in government, or at least in good minority government coalition, you lose the things that we've worked for. Yeah. It's not about being a conscience and bringing more stuff in. It's about losing what we already have if we don't.
All right, let's leave it there. Tony McQuail, good luck to you, sir. We'll see you on the debate stage later this week. Thanks for coming on.
Okay, well, if people want to see more, our website's Tony McQuail, greenprogressive.ca. We're running a very frugal campaign, but we've had a lot of good support from the other candidates in terms of working together in cooperation, and certainly Tennille. And that's what gives us our strength as New Democrats, is that we do believe in cooperation and working together.
Wonderful. Let's turn to one of those now. Tennille Johnston is another NDP leadership candidate. She's also on the line there, Tony. Thanks, Tony. Tennille, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, yeah, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for doing this. So, as I was saying to Tony there, it does seem like the NDP, have had a rough road as of late. There's some trouble there with the fundraising numbers. The parliamentary caucus is small. The recent polling numbers must be concerning for you and others. The Liberals are in a dominant position. How do you turn this all around?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm concerned. I think we have a huge opportunity in front of us. With, change comes growth. And it's really exciting to actually be a part of this leadership race and have the opportunity to bring some of those new, bold ideas to get people excited, to re-inspire our members, and to move forward in a really exciting way.
Yeah, as I was speaking there with Tony, it seems like there is and has been for a long time a debate over what the party should be. Should you be the party of conscience? Should you be that player, that key player in a minority government, pushing progressive ideas, pulling the Liberals to the left? Or should you make a play to try to win power, vie for power and try and win it all? Where do you stand in this debate?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think it's one or the other. Incrementally, as we grow and as we win our seats back, we get our party status and we gain that leverage that we had before, where we literally got the biggest healthcare win that a generation has seen. We do play that role of being the conscience, absolutely. However, we need some really big changes in our country. We need a wealth tax, and we know that the conservatives and liberals are never going to do that. And that is something that we have to do from a position of power in order to get those big, bold, progressive changes. We're championing a guaranteed livable basic income. There's no way that the liberals and the conservatives are going to support a guaranteed livable basic income, even though we've seen it lift people out of poverty. We've seen it reduce child poverty. We've seen it reduce crime rates. It's such an amazing opportunity to do so much for Canadians. But we know that that is an NDP policy that we're going to have to champion, and we're going to have to do it from a position of power. So I don't think it's one or the other.
Fair enough. But how do you deal with Trump? I mean, that is obviously a big factor in all this. It's just so significant, this relationship with the United States. I don't have to tell you that or anybody else. 2 million jobs in this country, either directly or indirectly, depend on trade with the United States. Voters are consistently putting it as one of their top 3 issues. I was looking at polling today. It's right below affordability. How do you handle a leader that is sometimes erratic? What's your proposal to deal with Trump?
Yeah, absolutely. I think our way of dealing with Trump is focusing on ourselves. We need to reinvest in Canada. We have so many assets within our own borders that we don't really harness and we don't leverage for Canadians. Our agriculture industry is amazing, but it's hampered down by our interprovincial food trade barriers. We don't support our farming industry in a good way so that we can develop like co-op farms and support the small farms that are feeding into their little local markets and in places like Moose Jaw. And we really need to look at our country as the asset to us that it is and invest in ourselves. Because when we do that work and we turn those industries into Canada, then we're not impacted as much by the United States. It can get us out of that rut where we're so enshrined and we absolutely depend upon the United States. So we need to invest in Canada. That is how we deal with Trump.
One of those investments is potentially an oil pipeline. As you know, the Prime Minister is leaning into natural resources to try and turbocharge the economy as it grapples with these trade threats. He's backing a pipeline to the Pacific, and there's a reason why. The last one they built, the Trans Mountain, it created some 15,000 jobs during construction. It generated $53 billion in economic activity. But I understand you're opposed to building another one. What would you do instead to stimulate the economy?
Yeah, I mean, we had a beautiful proposal come forward through the Assembly of First Nations that showed about closing the infrastructure gap and what that would do for our economy. And by doing that, how many jobs would be created. We're talking about 700,000 jobs. That's amazing. That's amazing stuff. We have the numbers that proves every dollar that we invest in doing that work, we're going to get 2 out of it at a minimum. So we have other opportunities within our own borders to make really solid investments that are going to allow our economy to thrive, and small investments that we can make as well that are going to do the same thing. If we want to watch our economy get an immediate uptick, why don't we invest in childcare? If we invest in childcare across this country and we target our healthcare workers and enable our healthcare workers that are sitting at home because they don't have access to childcare to go back to work, those folks that have good, awesome paying jobs that love their profession, they're going to be able to use that money to do really fun things with their family and contribute in our economy. But we don't look at investing in childcare that way. We don't look at those really quick moves that we could make that would not only support Canadians to get back into the professions that they love and support our healthcare system. We're looking at pipelines and mines and these really big billion-dollar investments that they're not immediate money. That stuff takes time and it's so destructive to our environment. So why don't we look for some of these quick wins so that we can do the really amazing things for people in Canada right now and help them just go back to work?
I want to end on this note, just quickly. Of course, there's 5 of you in this race. Avi Lewis has raised quite a bit of money. Heather McPherson is a sitting member of Parliament. What's your pitch? Why should party members go for you over the others?
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming in with a very different perspective. I'm a social worker. I'm a millennial. We just broke the glass ceiling and became the first Indigenous person to be on a major party ballot federally for leadership, which is absolutely amazing. And like, this is the stuff that I love to do. I love to do the impossible and show people that there are no mountains too big. We can climb them all, and we can have a thriving Canada that really fits everybody, and we leave nobody behind. So I just bring a very different perspective, and I think people are ready for that, and they're excited about that.
All right, let's leave it there. Tenille Johnston, NDP leadership candidate. Nice to see you. Good luck.
Bye. Thank you.